Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from a perspective of race. So tonight, I'm going to continue diving into, some topics that have really been on my mind in recent months. I'd say even longer. As I said, your political development and consciousness is something that's gonna, it's gonna come across, over a period of time. I don't think anybody just wakes up and starts seeing things from a different perspective in just one day. It's something that, you know, you gradually start forming different opinions, or at least considering other points of view. And the piece that I'm going to carry on tonight, that I'm going to present tonight, is just another example of this. How I've been wanting to look a little bit more at what people on the other side of the political aisle are saying. So this piece that I'm doing today is actually from a blog article in the original Portuguese, Black Brazilian woman. I think the original article came out in 2019. What she called her piece was thinking about the other side of Black feminism. And I added to the title, do Black men really have an advantage over Black women? What do the statistics say? Okay. Now, the reason why I think it's an important material to cover is that, for years, I listened to everything that was coming out of the left, whether it be the Black movement, the feminist movement, or the LGBT plus movement. And, like I said, I'd like to take in a little bit of everything, see what both sides have to say. What do people who don't have a dog in the fight on either side of the political aisle, what do they have to say? Always take a listen to the people who you consider to be not your allies. Consider what they have to say, because it's always possible that they could be right and you could be wrong. That's something that I've done over the years. And today's piece is just it's another example of this. I know we oftentimes get hung up in our political views, or whatever topic that it might be. No matter what topic comes up nowadays, there's going to be opposing views on that topic. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be one side or two sides or another side to how people see a particular subject. And I never want to box myself into a belief pattern where I completely believe in something and I'm not able to, analyze what other people are saying who may disagree with that particular thought. Now, when you do that, I think you are more likely to be deceived about something, because you believe so strongly in what you believe and you can't consider the other side. So then you can never really open up your eyes, because you refuse to even analyze the evidence. That leads to a great deception. And so for years, I considered what people, in, like I said, mostly leftist circles were saying, until some years ago, I started really listening to what other people were saying. And it wasn't even necessarily that I was making a transition over to the right or the conservative side. It's just that there were some cracks in the armor of truth that was coming out from critics of the left. And it doesn't have to be people who were hardcore leftist and, well, how can I put this? It doesn't have to be people who are hardcore on the left, and then those same people just start exposing other things that they've learned along the way. It could be people who were on the left at one time, and then they came across some information that made them completely abandon leftist politics. I'm quite sure there's people who were once conservatives who have crossed the aisle over into the more liberal side as well. But that's what's great about just development. Just clear thinking. There's plenty of people who used to be hardcore in whatever they might believe in, and all of a sudden they switch over to the other side. Now, where I'm standing these days, I can't say that I've switched over to any side because I see where elites are leading us. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether they're on the right or the left. It's like the right or the left, they both have their own ways of deceiving the population into accepting their agenda. So, the same way that I can say, some 20 years ago, when the American president was George W. Bush, and conservatives were running the country, there was a lot of criticism that came out about the George W. Bush administration. But then years later, that even before the Bush administration, there was criticism about the Bill Clinton administration. There was criticism about Barack Obama, and there's clearly criticism about Joe Biden right now. This criticism that goes along, can be delved out on both sides. So this is where I'm coming from. I'm saying I can't say that I'm a conservative. I can't say that I'm a liberal. I can say there are positive and negative attributes of both sides. And what we're seeing today is a lot of power coming out of the more liberal, left-leaning political slant these days. So my question is always, how far left do you go before you fall off the cliff? You know, are you willing to accept that it's a possibility that you've been deceived about something? All during the years that I've been blogging. First the blog was called Black Women of Brazil, and then somewhere between I'd say 2017 and 2019, I started transitioning because I started understanding like there were a lot of things going on the left that I didn't necessarily agree with, and it was just kind of like I was just going along to get along, whatever. And what's funny is that my reasoning for changing the name of the blog from Black Women of Brazil to Black Brazil Today, interestingly, it didn't really have anything to do with anything that was going on in Brazil. It had something to do with the situation that the reactions that was coming out to this popular documentary that I can't think it came out maybe 4 years ago, Surviving R. Kelly. And it amazed me, and this still happens today. When people don't like an opinion that you have, they immediately start accusing you of saying things that you didn't actually say. And I remember, during that whole documentary series, I was just adamant in what I was saying. Like, if R. Kelly did what he's accused of doing, of course he should be in jail. But I was just alerting people to the fact that you can't really just crucify R. Kelly when you saw so many people behind the scenes who made his crimes even possible. And there was plenty of blame to go out during the whole session of those, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 pieces to that documentary. And, I was debating people on Twitter, and people were just throwing verbal stones at me from every direction that I saw. It was just like, I would challenge people like, where did you see me say that? That's not what I actually said. Did you read what I said? Did you read what I wrote? Well, it's not, you didn't actually say that. You didn't actually write that, but it seemed like that's what you were saying. Like, no, you can't cite me for saying something that I didn't actually say just because you think that's how it sounded or that's what you think what I meant. I say what I say, take it for what it is. Don't try to twist my words into something else. This just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. People get mad about what something you say, and all of a sudden they start accusing you of saying things that you didn't say. Right. So, I mean, I was getting vitriol from everywhere. There were some Black American women in there. There were some Black Brazilian women in there. There were some Black American men in there. It just got absurd. It got ridiculous, to the point where, the main gripe that people had with me at that time is that the name of the blog was Black Women of Brazil. And obviously I was using a Twitter account, and the name of that Twitter account was also Black Women of Brazil. So it was like people, particularly Black Brazilian women, is like, this guy, it's a man behind this blog. He's not a Black Brazilian woman. He does not speak for us. And granted, I totally agree with that. When you're on social networks and you're having a debate with people, the name that you have can definitely deceive people into thinking something that may not necessarily be true. For years, I had the blog Black Women of Brazil. People thought it was a group of Black women who were running that blog. So I did feel, yeah, I was already leaning towards the fact that I felt like I needed to change the name of that blog. And eventually that was really just what pushed me over the edge. Because as I said, it wasn't, people were accusing me of supporting R. Kelly during that whole thing. And I'm like, I never said I supported R. Kelly. I've repeatedly said that if R. Kelly did what he was accused of doing, then yeah, he should pay the crime for what pay the time. If he committed the crime, he had to pay the time. I'll say that. But nobody wanted to deal with the other facts that came out behind that. And this is what, no matter what you say, whatever particular topic that you may talk about, you're going to get enemies, you know, who want to paint you into this or that. People don't like what I'm saying on the left. So they, well, people will say, okay, well, if the things that you're saying now makes you a conservative, you're a hardcore, extreme right wing, you're right wing conservative. And I'm like, I've never said that. I just simply say that I should have the right to be able to analyze both sides of the aisle and come to my own conclusion. That doesn't make me a liberal or conservative. It just means that there's a little bit wrong on both sides, there's a little bit right on both sides. In the end, I think we'll all see that whichever political slants that we have, both sides have a way of dominating societies in what some people believe will be a one world government one day. Now, I'm not going to get into that tonight, but you know what? I'll just say analyze the evidence. Okay. So anyway, I'm getting way off of the topic. Let me get back into this. One of the main reasons that, as I said, that I feel like I need to get into some of these topics, discussing more of the more conservative side of politics, is because there's a lot of deception going on. And if people were to know some of the things that were going on behind the scenes and what some of these agendas are all about, I think they would have to honestly take a look in the mirror and say, wow, I've been deceived. Matter of fact, thinking about being deceived, it brings to mind, something that the legendary Malcolm X once said, in one of his speeches. And every time I see this, every time I find there's a deception going on, this is something that just pops up in my mind when Malcolm X says something like, "You've been had, you've been took, you've been hoodwinked, bamboozled." I think that really sums up a lot of what I'm feeling, and regardless, there's going to be people who are going to believe what they believe. And I just have to leave them there because I have to consistently, evolve. Right. So let me get into today's topic again, thinking about the other side of Black feminism. Do Black men really have an advantage over Black women? What do the stats say? Now, today, again, as I'm talking about race from perspective, Brazil from a perspective of race, everything about this article is talking about Black Brazilian men and Black Brazilian women. You'll find that some of the things that apply in Brazil also apply in the United States. So it's intriguing. And this is why I want to cover this, because the mudslinging that's going on between Black American men and Black American women is just getting out of control. And I'm looking like a lot of content creators feel like one of the main reasons that this is happening is because of, Black feminism and just feminism in general. So my curiosity and my question would be, wow, another 5 or 10 years as feminism continues to explode in Brazil, I have to wonder what's going to be an effect there. So with that in mind, let me get into this article today. Thinking about the other side of Black feminism by a woman who calls herself Afro-Centrando Conceitos. She's like looking at, I guess you could translate this as saying, looking at concepts from an Afrocentric perspective, right? Okay. Obviously, these are a lot of women. I think this is probably, if it's not, it's from, obviously, it's a rally. You see the T-shirt here, it says, "A Marcha das Mulheres Negras." It was the first specifically Black women's march, and probably in Brazil's history. I think it went down in like 2015. So the original article in Portuguese was titled "Pensando sobre o outro lado do feminismo negro." Again, Afrocentrando Conceitos, from 2019. Almost, wow, it's October. And this is almost exactly 4 years old, this article. So she starts off the article. "There is no possibility of advancing as a gender if race is not in the question." So again, this piece by Afrocentrando Conceitos. This is her article. I'm going to comment as I go. So just, hang out, check out this piece. And again, I always say, consider as I'm talking about this, and it's coming out of Brazil, having to do with Black Brazilian men and women, whatever community that you live in, or whatever country that you might live in, just look and see, is this going on in your own country? Obviously, I'm from the United States. So I'm asking people to keep in mind as I read this article, how much of this applies to what's going on in the US as well. So, Afrocentrando conceitos. Her article goes, it starts this way. I've always been talking about why I don't consider myself a feminist anymore, but I wanted to speak in a way that expressed myself well. Before my racial consciousness, I say before I became Black in ideas, when I only saw suffering, I discovered feminism. Whoever has known me for about 5 years remembers me being very much a feminist who hated men. I even started to hate my brother and my father because of machismo, or male chauvinism. And one thing I didn't see is that behind a macho Black male, there's a whole social history. And what feminism doesn't do is look at race before talking about gender. Feminismo negro no Brasil is Black feminism in Brazil. This is one of the most popular, important Black feminist in Brazilian history is Sueli Carneiro in this picture here. Everyone knows that after I saw the other side of feminism, I started to say how feminism is racist and reproduces racism, especially in relation to the Black man. And no one remembers that root feminism is racist as hell. And there is no such thing as saying, oh, but feminism was not made for men anyway. Because there is no such thing as treating me well because I am a woman and crapping on Black men who until then were not even seen as men. And just like that, sisters, feminism is crapping on your ideas and making your mind so effing whitened, right? And I say more, there is no point in putting Black in front of feminism to say that I included Black women. There is no way to blacken a white root space. You consume a Eurocentric idea and you are passing on ish to those who are new on the path. And this idea not only destroys Black men, but also the Black woman because of thinking inside the white bubble that makes our vision as a race impossible. Black feminism F's over Black women because before you are a woman, you are Black. So racism will affect you like hell, like twice. Like the Black man, before being a Black man, he is a Black body, and racism will affect you twice too. And I'm not saying that we don't need to talk about gender. After all, it doesn't exclude itself, it complements itself. Some garbage that feminism also talks a lot about, it's about the feminicide rates that have been increasing. And are you aware that the rate has been falling a lot in relation to white women, right? While for Black women, it has increased 57%. Then comes the question of a conversation that happened through the messenger with Dandara Barbosa when we were talking about the suicide rates of Black men. So this is a story I did back in 2016, and it speaks on close to the statistic that she quoted. Black women victims of violence bring their cases to the organization. I think it's the Organization of American States. In a decade, the murder of white women in Brazil decreased by 9%, but it increased by 54% among Black women. So her report said 57%, but you get the idea. In this one particular year, they said that the assassinations of white women in Brazil decreased by 9%, while it increased among Black women by 54%. Has the feminicide of Black women been increasing despite feminism or because of feminism? Another thing that has increased is the incarceration of Black women. So is it because of feminism or despite feminism? This is crazy BS, okay? So this speaks to the fact that in the period that I had looked at, looking at the numbers, it was like, Brazil was quickly becoming one of the countries that most imprison people. I think Brazil is either number 3 or 4 in the world in the number of people imprisoned in the country. But along with, it's always been men that have been imprisoned, far more than women. But we see that the numbers of women increasing their prison population, and they're finding that it's majority Black women who are more going to prison than it is white women. Okay. I always say, You can't ask for gender and class equality before there is race equality. If there is no race equality, as long as Black women want to move forward, they will only be moving backwards. And I say this because in the gender journey, each woman reaches the place that men of her race finds themselves. Now go back and read that femicide, and the incarceration of Black women has been increasing. A Black woman will receive the same treatment as a Black man, and white women will receive the same treatment as the white man. If all Black women who call themselves feminists thought that, say, wait, if all Black women who call themselves feminists thought that way, they would see that they are shooting themselves in the foot. I don't know if she came up with that herself, as I think the article is from 2019. Matter of fact, she might have taken this from an article from, I was following this brother for a while when he called himself Michael William. I don't know if he officially changed his name. It's obviously an African influenced name that he's going by now, Taiwo Okoto. And he called his article from 2019, Black Feminism and the Shooting in the Foot of the Black Woman. So I'm wondering if she kind of borrowed that phrase from him, talking about what they call Black feminism in Brazil. Feminism was created to solve the situation of white women. Feminism leads women to seek equal treatment in relation to genders. Aiming at this, where are the Black men? And what equality will the Black woman fit in? You know, so this is what she's saying here. She sees feminism as a thing that was created to benefit white women. And a lot of people over the years have argued that it was a movement that was imposed on the Black community to create friction between Black men and Black women. Okay, I know a lot of people will reject that, but you know, let's have a discussion. And there we find the answer to the increase in the death and incarceration of Black women, that despite feminism, they continue to die. If they seek gender equality, that's where the Black man is, dying. Then I'll write a piece about the place of the Black man in society. Then you'll see that what I'm talking about is very real. You can't be proud and say that Black women are in the race when the race is to remain underemployed. I don't want to be there, and I don't want my irmãos pretos, Black brothers, there. Now, this is a social pyramid that's been much talked about for decades. And the pyramid says that white men are on the top of the pyramid, social pyramid, followed by white women, the Black man, and on the bottom being the Black woman. This has been a battle cry of the Black community, as well as, Black women and Black feminists. But, as I've said for a while, just because this is the way the pyramid breaks down, does this mean that this is necessarily because somebody is Black or necessarily because somebody is a woman? Of course, that may play a factor, but when we play into the idea that it's all either gender or race, we're not looking at all the statistics. And by the way, I'm going to make an extension to this mess of the social pyramid. The greatest BS that feminists have ever invented to say that the Black man oppresses me, that the Black man is above the Black woman. But guys, this doesn't make any sense. Let's think together. Black men are the ones who commit the most suicides. They are the ones who die the most at the hands of the police. They're the ones who drop out of school the most, are the ones who are most involved in drug trafficking. They are the ones who are most in the private prisons. They live up to a maximum of 27 years. What kind of privilege is that? The privilege of dying young. Now, I'm not sure what she means by live up to a maximum of 27 years. I mean, the statistics say that of those four groups, Black men are the one who live the least out of those four demographics, right? But all of these statistics, all of these numbers, or these phrases that she put in here, they can all be proven. Here's just some of the headlines that I took from online just to prepare for this article. Jovens homens negros são 67% mais vítimas de suicídio do que os brancos, saying young Black men are 67% more victims of suicide than white men. Here you have this a well-known stat that says the death of Black men in police actions in Brazil are almost 3 times bigger than that of whites, 2.8 times to be exact. Here's some more figures. As I said before, Brazil's prison population is exploding. At the time of this article, Brazil has more than 773,000 people incarcerated. This particular stat says uh, the almost totality of those imprisoned are of the masculine sex, men. They represent 90% of imprisoned Brazilians. Women represent around 8%. So just similar to what you see all over the world, it's always going to be far more men in prison than women. Um, and this is what here's a statistic that I came across. I'm sure there's more updated because this is from the year 2000, but I'm quite sure things haven't changed that much, at least in terms of the order. But this here says white women in 2000, their life expectancy was 73.8 years when they were born. For black women, it was 69.5 years. For white men, 68.2, and black men coming up in the rear at 63.2 years was their general life expectancy in the year 2000. So we see, here's a statistic. What does that say about black men? What does it say about the lives that black Brazilian men live, what they experience? Some more reports. The genders and the races of violence in Brazil. So the national rate of murder of black women was 64 black women per 100,000. Just one higher than non-black women. So 64 black women murdered per 100,000. On the other hand, you have the national rate in 2016, 735 murders of black men per 100,000, 254 per 100,000 for non-black men. So look at this number. 735 of 100,000 for black men versus 64 per 100,000 for black women. Where's the advantage that we see for black men there? They are being murdered vastly larger per 100,000 than black women. Okay. Just no comparison there. Brazil, similar to other countries in the world, is like of the people who get most murdered in the country every year, 93% are men. Where is the advantage there? It doesn't make sense. They don't want to know the reality of the black man. There is no way to put a black man on the same scale as a white man. And not to mention that whenever they talk about black men, it's always in a pejorative way, blaming the loneliness of black women and other BS on them. They can't analyze beyond that. So the whole idea of the solidão da mulher negra is something that I've talked much about here. And it's been a topic that I've covered a lot on the blog, the Black woman in love, how ethnicity impacts their relationships. The argument has always been that black women get left behind for long-term relationships simply because they are black. Here are two articles that talk about popular black women public figures, rapper Carol Conká and actress Erika Januza, who were dating white men at the time. And, it became another discussion online. A lot of people were saying, well, why is it that black men get all the shade when they date white women, but when black women do it, it's like, it's not a problem. But people brought this up and there was a huge debate about this discussion. And the general response from black women was that, well, we have to open our dating options because black men in general don't want us for long-term relationships. That's an ongoing debate that I never get tired of because I don't think we've really come to a really clear reason as to why it seems that a lot of black Brazilian men prefer to have, situationships with black women, but when they want to have long-term relationships and families and have children, they choose to do it with white men, with white women. A lot of people argue that black women are just as guilty of the same thing. So the discussion keeps going on this particular topic. But this is what she's talking about, blaming the loneliness of black women on black men. Okay, obviously there still needs to be more said and analyzed about the accusation. Black men are more likely to be homeless in Brazil. In my years in Sao Paulo, I always noticed that of the homeless population, you found a lot of very just almost jet black men living on the streets in Sao Paulo. Now, I'm not saying, they were the majority. Possibly they are. I don't know. I don't know the stat on that. But I was just saying, jet black, extremely dark skinned black men in Brazil, you don't nowadays you're not seeing a lot of them in comparison to, let's say, brown, light brown people who are clearly black. It's like, this in this whitening ideology of whitening people's appearance and their families through mixing with lighter skinned people. It's something that you see a lot. And you see it when you compare the numbers of a very dark skinned black men and black women. You just don't see that many. In all my years in Sao Paulo, I just didn't see a whole lot of jet black, dark people, black people. But I did notice that their representation in those living on the streets was much higher than their overall representation in Sao Paulo. That's something that I always noticed. There's always this one particular guy that I think about when I was living in Sao Paulo, because he would just be, I don't know where he would sleep at night, but the dude, he didn't have any shoes. His feet were always just jet black from walking in the dirt all the time. His hair he had dreadlocks that would just look like he hadn't washed his hair in months. And he was missing teeth, and he just struck you as having some mental issues. I would always see him just all over the neighborhoods where I would frequent. When I was catching a bus or going somewhere, I would always see that guy. I always wonder, whatever happened to him. When you see the homeless population, there are all sorts of people and different complexions of people on the streets in Brazil. But I'm just saying that you'll find more very dark skinned black men on the streets, and it's larger than their representation in the overall population. That's what I'm saying. So, thinking about all of this, we need to analyze the problems of Black feminism and see that continuing this idea, Black women will only go backwards, because there is no way to advance in the discussion of sexuality, class, and gender if race is not equal yet. Feminism goes hand in hand with racism. Feminism advances the side of the Black. Let me start over. Feminism goes hand in hand with racism. Feminism advances the side of the white woman so that she is next to the white man at the top, while screwing over the side of Black woman and all of her people. So before I puff out my chest and yell out, I'm a feminist, deaf to men, think, where would I be if I was born a man? First, remember that Black men die 93% more than Black women. The statistics show a very high level of involvement in drug trafficking and incarceration. Do the neck test and see that the majority of the men on the streets are Black men. Now, I just want to touch upon this 93% right here. It's like Black men die 93% more than Black women. I think what she's saying here is that of people who die violently in Brazil, in between Black men and Black women, 93% are going to be Black men versus like 7% of Black women. I have to look that up, but I'm quite sure that's what she's trying to say. Let me see the majority. So from that, stop, think, put your little hand on your head and ask yourself, is feminism really good for me? Final note, I'd like to make it very clear to the Urugus defending ladies and their theories that I'm not exempting the fact that there are Black male aggressors and all of that. What I want is for you to do an analysis and take into account that a Black man suffers as much as the Black woman, and racism affects both in the same proportion. The links to this article are taken from the Dissecting Racism Facebook page, Dissecando o Racismo. This is even though I haven't checked it out in a while, for some years I have been checking out this Facebook page. And these people, a lot of them are university students. A lot of them probably have already graduated, but they were looking at racism, feminism, and Black issues from a different perspective. And it's, I really appreciated their material. But I think the guy who was leading that particular Facebook page was, again, a guy who called himself Michael William. And, like I said, I talked about him early in this article. He actually changed his name. I don't know if legally, but at least in his pen name. So these are all of some of the links that what she was talking about in this article. I translated them, the titles, the statistics on the incarceration of Black men, racial violence, a reading on homicide data in Brazil, profile of out-of-school youth, profile of young people involved in drug trafficking, profile of homeless people, Black men commit suicide more than Black women. So these are some of the stats that I wanted to just feature because they go along with what she was saying in this article. And it's like, you can't just look at just statistics, grouping people and groups by salary, because that just doesn't tell the whole story. So there are more and more people who are just looking and saying, look, I don't consider myself a feminist. A lot of people who are on the more conservative side, once upon a time, and I've featured a couple of these authors who have criticized, feminism and what's going on the left, because they were once feminists themselves. Just like the girl who wrote this particular article said the same thing. She was once on the feminist bandwagon until she found some contradictions and just some things that she didn't like that was going on in feminist circles. A lot of Black men have spoken about this as well in Brazil, but I think it's a smaller minority. But what I've noticed is that there is a lot of money going into the feminist cause. And as I said in a previous article, an article that I featured by Black Afro-Brazilian conservative Paulo Cruz, it seems that similar to the United States, all the leftist movements are all bundled up into one group. And I always said that's a bad idea. Why do you mix your movements with other movements? You need to have your own independent movement. But what I'm seeing is that like I said, there's a lot of money being put into leftist organizations and movements these days. That's something else I have to get into one of these days. And in the same way that I've said, you can't necessarily look at inequality between men and women as just being something that's because of sexism. The same way you can't look at racial inequalities between Black, whites, and others and say, well, if Black people are behind in these categories, it must be because of racism. That's just not the case. I mean, racism might play a factor in it, but you can't just say it's all because of racism. One example of why I say this, if we were to say that African Americans are lower on the economic pole in the United States. Now, historically, I can agree with that for different reasons. Things that we were owed after the slavery period that were never given to us, I totally agree with that. But in terms of income, if we were to say that racism explains why Black people are on the bottom of the list in terms of household income, does that say that the Asian community is racist against white Americans because they out earn white people? Just think about that argument for a minute. Per capita Asians, I saw a list that broke down more of the ethnicities and was just like, Filipinos, they had Indians, they had people from Sri Lanka, and they was just looking at all of these different groups. Like, there's numerous groups in the United States of people who out earn white people. So is that to argue that because white people earn less than these groups, that these groups must be racist against white people? So we can't necessarily say that. Now, when we look at household income by ethnicity in the United States, we see whites at 78,000 and Blacks at 48,000. But what explains that? One thing that we've come to learn is that one of the main reasons that we have lower income for Black families and household is because more than half of Black children live with one parent in 2022 compared to 1 in 5 of white children. So Black people, we're more single than other populations. Let me see. 2017 to 2021, the share of families headed by single parents was 76% among African American families, 39% among white families, almost half, 31% among Asian families. So one of the main reasons our household income is lower than so many other groups is because we only have one income coming in. Okay. Another thing I want to speak on real quick is this movement called the Mais de Maio. It's a group of women, a reaction against the violence of the state. This movement was founded after the death of 564 people in 10 days in a period in 2006, and the crimes continue. The May crimes, they're saying this was 10 years later. And it's a group of women who came together to speak out like, you're killing all of these are mostly Black people, of course. They're saying, you're killing our uncles, our fathers, our brothers, our sons. This has to stop. The Mais de Maio movement. I actually met this woman. She's one of the founders of the organization, Débora Maria da Silva. And I just remember some years ago, having this discussion with some feminists about this topic, like, Black women are suffering because they're being left behind because their fathers and brothers and husbands are being murdered in the streets. Look at this heavy burden they have to carry, which is true. I totally agree with that because they're left behind to have to raise kids on their own. But, you can't make this comparison in terms of being more victimized because they're still here to fight the system that continues to murder black males, but they're still here because the males that they're actually fighting for are no longer here to defend themselves or speak out. So these are just some of the things I like to discuss because it's like, okay, what perspective are we really looking at this from? You know, can you really compare a woman who's left behind to, raise her children and to sustain the family when the man lost his life? I don't think that's even a fair comparison. It's not diminishing the work of the Maestri Mayo, but they're still here to struggle. That's how I see that. So I'm going to end this article here today, this video. I'm curious to know what you all thought about it. Again, this piece is called Thinking About the Other Side of Black Feminism. Definitely want to hear your comments about, what I talked about tonight. Share your comments in the comment section. Like this video, share this video. Consider subscribing to this channel. If you've seen more than a couple of videos that you appreciate it, click on that notification bell so that you get more alerts when I put up new videos. And with that said, I'm going to end this here and ask you all to come by and check out the next video that I post.